Hi from Barista Course Hamburg. The Profitec Go 2.0 has been on the market for a few weeks now. And maybe you've seen our podcast with Michael Hauck, because he brought the machine along for that and gave us a little introduction. We've taken a bit more time now to really put it through its paces. If the first Profitec Go hadn't been so good already, you could almost say the new Profitec Go 2.0 has truly come of age. There are really many new features, so we'd like to give you a more detailed introduction to the Go. Up until now, we felt that the Profitec Go is one of the best single boiler machines on the market. And whether that's also true for the Profitec Go 2.0, you'll find out in just a moment. If you enjoy these tests, we'd love it if you'd like, comment and especially subscribe, as that really helps us gain more reach and become more visible. And that supports the work we're doing here for you. We'd like to thank you very much for that. But now let's get back to the Profitec Go 2.0. About 2 years ago, we already made a video about the Profitec Go, and if you've seen it, then you know that we were very impressed. And that's also the reason why it's been in our course for 2 years now, even though we usually replace the machines in shorter cycles. And now version 2.0 has come onto the market, and with it some significant expansions and improvements. Some things that we and other testers criticized in our video back then, they have actually taken up and changed or improved. It offers you significantly more possibilities and, above all, assistance in your daily preparation of your espresso. But first, let's take a very quick look at the external facts. The housing has remained almost the same in its basic features and its design. It still has a width of 21 centimeters, a depth of 38.1 centimeters, a height of 36.2 centimeters, and weighs about 12.8 kilos. As before, it is also available in the colors black, red, yellow, blue, and matte stainless steel. What we like, it's only a small thing, but Profitec now completely avoids plastic in its packaging and has switched to cardboard. Although much has improved and significantly more options have been added, the price has remained almost the same. The old Profitec Go cost 949 euros. The new version costs almost 50 euros more, which means it's around 999 euros. I think the stainless steel version is a little bit more expensive. To be honest, we had expected a significantly higher price jump, especially because the cost of supplied parts has also increased significantly. In this respect, it's naturally positive for us as consumers that Profitec has taken a different path here. Regarding the pricing, Profitec apparently wasn't quite sure how to position it, because originally it was planned to offer a Profitec Go Plus alongside the old Profitec Go, and of course at a higher price. In some reviews here on YouTube, you'll see a small plus next to the Go here, and those are pre-production machines that were sent out to some testers. Our machine is one from the very first series production, and therefore we have some slightly different accessories than you might have seen in some reviews so far. The drip tray already changed a bit in the first version. I wasn't such a fan of this drip tray at first, but the advantage is quite simple. With the new drip tray with a plastic insert, you don't see all the coffee residue as much. In the first version, which was completely made of stainless steel, the coffee residue was much more visible and you had to clean it a bit more often. Here you really hardly see it at all. The capacity has increased a very little bit. The very first drip tray caught about 800 milliliters. And the new one here now holds 900 milliliters. The water tank still has a capacity of about 2.8 liters, and the filter holder for a Brita Aqua Aroma Crema filter remains unchanged. However, two things have changed. Firstly, a plastic guide has been added to the machine, making it easier and more precise to insert the water tank. It also fits much better. And secondly, a water level sensor has been installed, which was really missing on the old Go, because it provides another advantage. Because now we finally have a last shot function. This means that if the water tank is about to run empty, you'll see it on the new OLED display, and these two lights will also flash to alert you that the tank needs to be refilled. And as I said, it has a last shot function, which means your espresso extraction won't be interrupted. Furthermore, your boiler remains filled with water, which means the boiler doesn't cool down. Once you've refilled your tank, you can immediately start your next espresso extraction. Thankfully, Profitec listened to the initial feedback on the Go one. The first thing they did was move the display, which used to be down here, up to the top at last. Also, there are no longer 3 control buttons here, but only 2 push buttons. These are intended for various functions. And we'll get into what those are a bit later when we dive deeper into the menu. There's another improvement to the lid above the tank. It now has 4 small rubber feet, which prevents the rattling that sometimes occurred with the first Go version. Otherwise, as I said, the basic housing remains the same, but the whole design from the Profitec Move was adopted for the side panels. But that's just a minor design feature and has no technical relevance. There's also been a slight change to the boiler. It's been reduced from 400 milliliters to 300 milliliters. It's an insulated brass boiler with a ring brew group. This is still located directly above the brew group, forming a single structural unit with it, so to speak. This has the advantage that the machine can heat up faster overall, and it also increases the temperature stability of the espresso extraction. And both of these things already impressed us, particularly with the first Go version. And you'll see later in our temperature test whether the values for the Go 2.0 have remained the same. The biggest innovation of the Go 2.0 is the way you operate it. It's been given a completely new control unit and an OLED display, just like we already know from the Profitec Move. While we still had to start and stop the extraction manually with the first Go version, it's now time-controlled here. This means you can pre-program your espresso extraction to within 1/10 of a second. Then you just turn it on and the machine will switch off automatically accordingly. We've already explained the benefits of this in one of our videos that we uploaded recently. We'll link that for you. We've tried to explore the differences a little bit. What are the advantages of a time-controlled extraction? What are the advantages of a volumetrically controlled extraction? And above all, we've tried to explain and explore what happens to the taste of your espresso. And then the question always arises, which do you prefer? Volumetric control or time control? For me personally, the balance of the espresso is very, very important. That means I want it to taste neither too sour nor too bitter. And in my opinion, time control helps me much more and goes a lot further than a volumetric control system would. Of course, you can see it differently. There are people who definitely prefer volumetric control. Just write in the comments what kind of experiences you've had. Maybe you prefer one or the other, or do it completely differently. And if you haven't really tried it yet, watch our video. We explain a bit there, and then just try out which type of extraction suits you better. Another new feature is the portafilter, which we actually already know from the Profitec Move. It's a bottomless portafilter that has various silicone inserts. One advantage is that the machine can heat up faster because we simply have less metal that we need to heat up. But there's also been a small innovation and I think improvement with this silicone spout as it's become a bit flatter. This gives you a bit more space between the drip tray and the portafilter spout. However, if you don't like these silicone spouts and prefer stainless steel, you now have the option to use a stainless steel spout there. You can order that separately. There's also something else new. On the underside of this spout, we now have a little reminder that we can also place this silicone spout directly on the edge of the table and tamp that way. That means we don't necessarily need a tamping station because the silicone won't scratch your countertop, of course. And that brings me straight to the scope of delivery because something else has changed. Specifically, the tamper has changed. We all know this tamper here, this old one that was previously included. It's very, very flat overall. Now there's a significantly thicker tamper, and that has the advantage that we can tamp a bit more precisely because the tamper doesn't sink as deep into the basket anymore. That means we can control a bit better whether we're tamping straight or not. Overall, it's also become a bit heavier as a result, of course. It's a bit taller and feels very, very good, although the old one also fits well in the hand. But because it's a bit taller, it's just a bit easier to handle for large hands like mine. So much for the tamper. The old one goes away, and now we have the spouts. As mentioned, there's this double spout that's included. Then, of course, there's a single spout. We have the portafilter as a bottomless version, and we get a whole bunch of baskets included. On one hand, we get a fairly large, roughly 21-gram basket, and on the other, we get a classic 18-gram basket. Sometimes it's also referred to as a 14, but 18 grams should definitely be filled in. Then we get a single basket included, of course, and finally a blind basket. And beyond that, we naturally get an instruction manual included logically. We get a small brush for cleaning included, and we get a water tank filter included. And with that, we actually have everything we need to get started at home. The only thing missing, of course, is the coffee. Otherwise, as I said, much has remained the same. We still have the option to set our maximum espresso pressure using the overpressure valve. Specifically, we can set it between 8.5 and 12 bar just as before. I must confess, however, that I'd actually wish we could lower the pressure even further, so we could then change significantly more in our espresso. And likewise, the fast heat up function has remained, as we already know it from some ECM machines. Profitec Move has that too. You also have the option to turn it off, but in our view, that makes no sense at all. This function is basically explained very simply. Namely, the boiler is overheated at the beginning during the warm-up phase. And that's so we can bring the remaining metal components of the brew group to the temperature the whole machine needs much faster after a flush. As I said, this allows us to achieve a significantly shorter warm-up time. After the flush we perform, the boiler automatically refills with colder water so that it's cooled down a bit overall. That has also become a bit more automated. You do have to start the flush yourself, but the machine is programmed to stop after 10 seconds. And you'll see if that's enough later in the conclusion of our temperature test. And when you need to perform the flush, it's shown on the display and also by the outer edges of these buttons flashing. They always alert you if something isn't right. That means, for example, if the water tank is empty or if, as I said, you need to perform the flush. And there's another small improvement, which is that there's finally a hot water dispenser. That will, of course, especially please all Americano drinkers. And with the small boiler, you also have the advantage of always having fresh water in your Americano, so it doesn't taste stale like it sometimes does from large boiler machines. To dispense hot water, just briefly press these two buttons here and the pump will start right away. You then dispense the hot water by simply turning the tap on and turning it off again when you have enough hot water. And by pressing any of the buttons, you turn the whole thing off again. Now, of course, a lot of hot water has run out. That means the machine now needs a little bit of time to get back to our target temperature in the boiler. And that brings us to the biggest innovation, which is the way you operate the machine. It's always an interplay between these two buttons and these two buttons here below the display. Although each of these buttons also has a shortcut function assigned to it. We'll explain those to you in a moment, along with the programming. To enter the menu, you have to press these two buttons below the display for about 3 seconds. Now we can already see the brewing temperature. To then get into the submenu, we have to click here at the top once, and now we can change the temperature using the two buttons on the right. And then we confirm the whole thing by pressing the top button. If we then press the bottom button, we exit the menu again. And that's how we program the machine in all the menus and submenus. To start off, let's maybe go into the most important menu first, which is the brew settings menu. Now I'll select these two buttons here. That means I currently want button 1, and I'll go into it now with another click. Now I can change the individual values. That means I can change the time. I can set it higher or lower now. By confirming, I'm basically saying that I want to program a brew pause into the process. So in other words, I want to set up a pre-infusion as well. Now, I'll move on to the next point and mention that it should last for about, let's say, roughly 5 seconds in total. That's how long the pump run time is. And finally, I'll enter the pause until extraction. Let's say 5 seconds for that too. Now I'll confirm everything, and just like that, I've programmed the top button. This means my next espresso extraction will work so that the pump runs for 5 seconds in the initial phase. So it wets our coffee puck, then there's a 5-second brew pause, and after those 5 seconds, our extraction runs for 25 seconds. But I can also program the whole thing using a shortcut function. And we'll do that now with the bottom switch. I'll just press it briefly here. Now it asks us, do we want to have a pre-infusion, yes or no? We want to have it. Now I'll start the pump runtime about 5 seconds. Now you can see the brew pause running just below, and at this point the extraction time officially starts. I'll stop that again as well. Let's say, for this example, let's make it last for a total of 27 seconds. By pressing the bottom switch here once more. And now we've programmed this bottom button using the shortcut function. Of course, that's not quite as precise, but of course we can now change the values we just entered here within the brew settings again. But now both switches are set so that we have a pre-infusion phase for each with pre-wetting and a brew pause. If for some reason we don't want that now, meaning if we want to run our next extraction without pre-infusion, then we don't need to reprogram everything or go into the brew settings menu. We can also solve that very easily using a shortcut function. Namely, we press the left button once, and with that we simply turn off the pre-infusion for both buttons, but of course we can just as easily turn it back on. Pre-infusion is not exactly a simple topic. It suits some types of coffee, and for other types of coffee it doesn't fit quite as well. And if you haven't looked into the topic quite so deeply yet, then I would recommend just leave out the pre-infusion for now. First, try to find out when your coffee tastes best to you. And once you've worked through all that, then maybe try using pre-infusion to change your espresso a little bit. Generally speaking, pre-infusion might be better suited for lighter roasts because they're significantly harder and the flavor particles aren't washed out quite as easily as they are from a classic dark Italian coffee. With pre-infusion you could support that a bit, but as I said, if you're not that deep into the subject yet, just leave it out. And if you do want to try it, here's a little tip for the start. If you program it through here and have your coffee in the portafilter, let the pre-wetting phase run until the first drop appears and then program the time for your brewing pause. And then maybe shorten the initial pump run time just a tiny bit so that the first drops don't actually come out of your portafilter yet. That's a rough guideline you can follow if you're just getting started with this topic. But there's also another shortcut function. Now, as it stands, our extraction time is limited. If we want to override that, it's actually quite easy to do. That means we simply start our extraction process and press the button on the opposite side. Now the extraction will continue running almost indefinitely. By pressing the button again, we can then stop it. And with that, we've already learned the most important function of the machine. But of course, there are plenty of other things you can do with the machine or ways it can assist you. For that, we'll go back into the menu, so press for 3 seconds and let's select the Eco mode, for example. I find this quite important because it lets you set how long your machine should stay on after it hasn't been used. You can turn it off or you can change the shut-off time in 10-minute steps. I'll switch it off. Another interesting feature is the timer mode. You can activate or deactivate this. Before that, however, we need to have set the clock. That means we have to set our time. Let's go through it and say what day it is. And in the next step, we can set which day of the week and, if applicable, at what time the machine should turn on. And you even have 2 times per day available. That means you might set the machine to turn on at 6 a.m. on Monday mornings, off again at 7 because you're leaving the house. And in the afternoon, you might come home at 4 p.m. and you want the machine to have already turned on beforehand so you can have an espresso right away. And we can, of course, set that individually for each day of the week. Another helpful feature is the cleaning reminder. That means the machine reminds us to rinse the brew group, and we can set that individually. We would recommend cleaning the brew group at least every 40 shots. If you don't reach 40 shots in a week, we still recommend performing this brew group cleaning once a week. The good thing is there's now also a program for that. That means the machine automatically guides you through this process. Let's go back into the menu for that as well. So here it is. When we're in this menu, the machine tells us exactly what to do. Once we've done all that, we naturally have to reset the cleaning reminder. We do that just like this through a menu setting. And another point has been added, which is boiler descaling. That's a topic that's usually hotly debated, and it's generally recommended that you definitely shouldn't descale dual boiler or heat exchanger machines with large boilers. With small machines or machines with small boilers, this is certainly possible, and here too it provides some assistance. That means we go back into the menu, look for the descaling menu item, and then start the process. And the machine now automatically guides us through this entire descaling process. I'm not going to start that now though, because the problem is that you can't stop this descaling process once it's started. That means once we've started the descaling, we have to let this process run until the very end. In particular, it's important that after descaling, the boiler is of course rinsed with clean water. This is of course a bit too long here. Apart from that, the machine is still relatively new and there's no need to descale it just yet. And regarding the calcification of the machine, we have another function, the so-called filter reminder. That means we have this filter here and we insert it into the water tank. And here we have three functions, A, B, or C. This simply means that we can adjust the filter to determine how much lime is removed from the water. Setting A is the lowest, removing about 30% of the lime, B 50% and C 70%. And we can find all of this here again in the filter reminder. I'll go back in now. And now we can say whether I want to be reminded or not. Specifically according to these 3 points, A, B, or C, or I can enter a specific number of liters. But there's a small catch to the whole thing, and that is that the machine doesn't have a flow meter. This means if I enter a certain value here, say 40 liters or something, it doesn't mean that 40 liters have actually run through. It could be many more liters because the calculation or estimate is based on the pump's run time. And if I flush a lot or drink a lot of Americanos, for example, I use significantly more water per second of pump runtime than when brewing an espresso. In other words, if you drink many Americanos, you use much more water than the pump or the machine actually calculates. And that's why it's a little bit imprecise. We definitely recommend removing as much lime as possible from your water, as that's the best way to maintain your machine. So in the beginning, maybe test every 2 weeks how much lime is still in the water after you've installed the filter. And then eventually you'll figure out an approximate time for when this filter is used up. And you can then use this time period for future filter changes. Additionally, maybe enter a specific number of liters anyway, so you're definitely reminded when this filter should be replaced. Because that way you prevent your machine from getting too much lime buildup. And we find that much more important than descaling the machine too frequently. Because the problem with descaling is, of course, that the heating element and the boiler are attacked by the acid every time, even if you rinse it thoroughly afterwards. We forgot one more setting, and that's the steam temperature setting. You can, of course, adjust that too. We go back into our menu, then go to steam temperature, and can then turn it up or down accordingly. We recommend you just leave it at 134 degrees because then you'll have plenty of steam power. But we'll take a look at that in a moment. There's one very last setting, but it's probably not quite as relevant for you, and that is the offset setting. Just a quick explanation of what offset actually means. Offset simply describes a difference between the temperature shown here and the actual water temperature coming out of the shower screen below. That means if 92 degrees is displayed here, it doesn't necessarily mean the temperature coming out down here is actually 92 degrees. And we could now use the offset setting to adjust the machine so that if we measure, okay, only 91 degrees is coming out, we change the offset value by 1 degree so that 91 degrees would actually be displayed here. But that only works if you have a measuring portafilter. That was quite a lot of information and individual menu items. We haven't gone into every single detail now, but as you can see, a lot has changed on the machine. And considering that, you have to say that the price increase of only 50 euros is more than fair. So I've talked a lot now, and I finally want to drink an espresso. Normally, I always use our Choco Breeze coffee to test it. But we've since developed another coffee blend together with a roaster, actually with the same roaster as before. This new coffee blend gives us another option to try out and compare. Specifically, we've developed a fruity coffee. Because we were still missing that a bit, and depending on the time of day, I just love fruity coffees too. We had a small challenge when developing this coffee, which is that I often find light roasts lack body. That means we don't get that classic Italian mouthfeel, and it actually always feels a bit watery. And I have to admit, I don't like that very much. I do love fruity coffees, but I also love that classic Italian body. And we finally achieved that with this roast here, and I'm going to try it now. I'm going to grind it now with a hand grinder. This is a very interesting grinder because it has a flat burr set, and from this manufacturer Coffee Sing or Sing, I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. There are several hand grinders with very different burr sets, with conical burrs, with flat burrs, and so on. And we'll do another test on that as well. I'm going to speed this up a bit now though, because it takes a little longer to grind 18 grams. Of course, we'll also weigh out how much actually ended up in the cup. And here we go. It could be that the pump's runtime was just a little bit too long. That is now 28 grams. That's exactly what I'd like to have for this coffee. And now let's take a moment to see if the pre-infusion process actually did it any good or if it made no real difference at all. Super delicious. I think we could have let the extraction time run for maybe 2 seconds longer. It's still a touch sharp, but it has a beautiful acidity, a beautiful fruitiness. And above all, what I said earlier, we still have that classic Italian mouthfeel. That means we have a beautiful creamy body that just feels great on the tongue. No bitterness at all, a nice fruit, a light acidity, which I'd integrate a bit more next time. Meaning maybe I'd extend the extraction by 2 seconds, as I said, but otherwise fantastic coffee. I personally like it very, very much, and from September it will also be available in our shop. So now, of course, we haven't made a cappuccino yet, or rather, we haven't frothed any milk yet. We're doing that now. We've already filmed this in advance in our test room, but I'll simply show you how we get to the milk foam. And it's actually quite simple. What we do is press the right button here. And then we will also notice the steam symbol appearing. And now we also see the actual boiler temperature and not the converted extraction temperature. And now the boiler is heating up and the whole thing takes about 30 to 35 seconds. So super fast. And the interesting thing is also the reverse process is relatively quick. I have the impression, not quite as fast as with the old Go. We just exit here and now the boiler is being refilled. That means cold water is drawn in so that we can cool down the entire system again. However, we recommend that you flush once more after the machine has actually indicated that it's cooled down. We found that it takes about another, maybe just under 1.5 to 2 minutes to really get back to the temperature that we're actually looking for. Because before that, it's unfortunately still a little bit too hot. We've tested this, of course, and here we can see that after a 25-second flush, we're unfortunately still a bit too high in temperature. As I said, wait another 1.5 to 2 minutes or flush a second time, and then you'll have reached your original temperature again. And so for a single boiler machine, that's actually quite fast. And after this short wait, you'll reach exactly the starting temperature you're looking for again. Yes, and as you've seen, the milk frothing works very, very well, with both small and large pitchers. However, we would recommend that if you're still a beginner, you might want to use a different nozzle. Specifically, we've found that with the single hole nozzle available from ECM, we get a more controlled rolling phase, and you also have the advantage that heating the milk takes a bit longer. This means you can correct any mistakes you might have made a little bit better. One thing we forgot to mention is that, for one, we have a cool touch steam wand. That means it doesn't get hot as quickly, so you won't burn yourself. And the other thing is we have a single circuit machine. This means that we have a bit of condensation at the beginning, which is about 25 to 30 milliliters. You should drain that off a bit at the start so you don't end up with a drink that's too watery overall. If you want to use the single-hole nozzle from ECM, you'll need a small adapter, an intermediate piece between the nozzle and your steam wand, because otherwise it's not compatible. You can, of course, get both from your ECM or Profitec dealer. Before we get to the conclusion, we'll naturally come back to our temperature test. This is an important point, but one that always has to be seen a bit in perspective. The thing is, we've had very, very hot outdoor temperatures lately, which naturally led to high temperatures indoors as well. We had a room temperature of about 24 degrees. And there we could see once again how much the behavior of machines changes. Simply because we have a different room temperature. This room temperature increased by 2 to 3 degrees simply led to the machine indicating after just 4 minutes and 30 seconds that we should perform a flush. That's extremely fast, of course, and overall, it's not quite enough yet. Thankfully, it's a bit cooler outside now, and we're back to room temperatures of around 20 degrees. We conducted our last test at 20.8 degrees, which puts us exactly in the temperature range we like for our tests. We'll show you our test chart here now. We had a room temperature of just under 21 degrees. The same goes for the water temperature in the boiler. It's always important that everything is as consistent as possible. And in this case, the machine took about 5 minutes and 40 seconds until it indicated that we should perform a flush. After that, we waited for another minute. That's about the time you might need to grind your coffee, fill your portafilter, and get everything ready. And after that, we pulled our 10 test shots. And as you can see, the machine needs a bit more warm-up time during the first 3 shots to reach our target temperature of about 92 degrees. This means that if the machine indicates after 5 minutes and 30 seconds that you should flush, don't pull your first coffee right away because the machine isn't fully heated through yet. Give it a total of about 7 to 8 minutes because then you can be sure it's at the target temperature. And the great thing about the machine is that it maintains the target temperature very precisely throughout every single shot. So we don't have any major fluctuations. This means that during the final shots, the machine neither gets particularly hot, nor does the temperature drop significantly. And that's actually something we usually only find in much more expensive machines. We had the same result, as I said, with the first version of the Go. It really surprised us how temperature stable it is. We were able to determine a small offset of about 1.5 degrees, and we'll be readjusting that on the machine soon. But as mentioned before, the whole thing is very, very dependent on room temperature. That means the hotter it is at your place, the faster it heats up, and the more likely it is that the offset will be a bit larger. And if it's very, very cold in your room, it's possible that the temperature might even be a bit too low. But as I said, unfortunately, you can really only determine that with a measuring portafilter. Of course, we also tested the machine's consumption, and we reached a value of about 0.071 kilowatt hours for the heat-up phase. That's really not much. And up to the first cappuccino, the machine consumes about 0.11 kilowatt hours. Over our entire test cycle, that is over 10 espressos, we only consumed a total of 0.122 kilowatt hours. So overall, it's a fairly economical machine, and you can of course support that a bit more with the eco mode. And that brings us to the conclusion. As you've seen, quite a lot has happened. And some people are naturally wondering, is it necessary to upgrade from the 1 to the 2? If you already own a Go one, then definitely not, because that's a really, really great machine. But if you're currently looking to buy a new machine, this is absolutely a recommendation from us. We think it's still one of the best single-circuit machines currently on the market. That's partly because we have a short heat-up time and because we have surprisingly good temperature stability. Then we have a very, very quick switch between the espresso extraction temperature and steam frothing. And the reverse path is also very, very fast, taking just under 2 minutes. Above all, as I said, after those 2 minutes, you reach your target temperature very precisely again, and not every machine achieves that. And for small households of between 2 and 4 people, this machine is wonderfully suited. You can work with it beautifully. However, if you constantly have guests, then it naturally becomes a bit difficult. Single-circuit machines are simply not suitable for that. With this machine, unlike the first version of the Go, nothing bothered us. With the first version, there were still a few small things that weren't quite right. We didn't have a last shot function, the display was awkwardly positioned, and a few other small things. All that's been fixed now, so we think it's a great machine. Just take a look at it in a shop somewhere if you're currently looking to buy a machine. Our old Go is now going into retirement, so to speak, and will be replaced by the new Go in our training room. However, we'll still be keeping the first Go, either as a backup in case a machine breaks down, or if we have another corporate event where we simply need more machines. As always, we're interested in your opinion on these new features of the Go. Maybe you could just write it in the comments. For us, it's always very interesting to know what you look out for. But also for the manufacturers, because we've found that almost all of them are grateful for any suggestions from us and especially from you, so they can use them as a guide for future machines and perhaps fulfill your wishes. And if you liked our video, then we'd be happy about every like, of course. But we especially need your support. Subscribe to our channel because that helps us enormously to continue running it in the future and to carry out tests for you, like with the Go or soon with a few hand grinders or whatever else. We'd like to thank you very much for that, and we wish you enjoy a delicious coffee until next time. Thank you very much and see you soon.
Ba ba ba